Welcome to the Legacy Lifestyle Podcast. I am with my lovely cohort. I said cohort this time. I don't know. I'm going to just see if I can come up with a different name every time. I don't even know if cohort's the right word.
I don't know.
Whatever. I don't know. We'll figure this out at some point. Anyway, hey, we want to jump right in today, and we're calling this podcast. We're saying, what's your legacy? Yeah. What is your legacy? So as you think about this, and we want to challenge you with this concept of legacy. This is, after all, the Legacy Lifestyle Podcast. And so we're going to kind of unpack this for what it means to us, kind of why we started this. So why did we start this, Jesse? I'm putting you on the spot.
Because I think we want people to understand that everyone leaves a legacy, yes, whether you're intentional about it or not. And so our heart is just to help people be more intentional. Be more intentional with your decisions, with life, with relationships, all of it, because it does matter. And I think that's kind of my heart in helping people leave a legacy, whether that's in their family, in their marriage, and whatever. Yeah,
so we really are compelled. I mean, I think we're both kind of wired this way. I think it has to do with our upbringing and just how we were raised, that this idea, we just kind of had this, I guess you call it maybe a Midwestern ethic of leave something better than you found it, and right. I think a lot of people could relate to that. We're not unique or special in that way, but I think it's something that really does strike at the heart of who we are. And so we really want to challenge our kids with that, our community. We've been leaders in our church for a long time. And obviously I think just as Christians, fundamentally, now whether you are a Christian or not, I think everyone relates to this idea of altruism and philanthropy, things like that. We love stories like that. We feel connected to other people when we see people who live beyond themselves for other people. And I think it's a very Christian message. But again, whether you're a Christian or not, you can live with those kind of convictions. Yeah. Now, obviously, we come at it from that angle of faith. And really, a couple of years ago, kind of when COVID first broke out, I preached a series kind of on this legacy lifestyle thing. And so if you're interested at all in some of this podcast, we're going to be referencing some of those episodes. We're going to kind of do this legacy series because we want to unpack all this stuff. But really where this all kind of got started was a few years back, enrolled working on a master's degree in leadership, and just all this stuff is communicating to me. And then we took a trip to the Black Hills, and we went up there and we went to the Crazy Horse National Monument there. Yeah. And I just remember sitting in, just watching the little 10-minute presentation. Now, I've been there before. I'd been there multiple times. But for whatever reason, it really stood out to me, just this idea of legacy. And really, there's two men there. There was Standing Bear, right, from that nation, representing that. And then also Korczak Zielkowski. And my apologies if I'm butchering that name. But Korczak... Korczak, what was really interesting was in the film, he made this statement. And so here's this guy setting out. Standing Bear said he wanted people to know. He said specifically he wanted the white man to know that they had heroes too.
Absolutely. And
I think, again, this kind of resonates, this idea of legacy. Standing Bear is like, hey, there's people that I want to honor. I want generations later. And that's the thing with legacy thinking, you have to think about generations.
Right. Well, and the thing that stood out is that both men still have kids, grandkids, great grandkids that are still stepping into this position of finishing the project that their great grandpas started. And so it's really cool to see that they started something that they knew they would not see complete in their lifetime. And I think as humans, we tend to make it about ourselves. Instead, it's like what I came away with that is just that I need to think outside and beyond my generation. And what I'll leave in my name, but it's like, what am I going to leave for my kids and my grandkids and even my great grandkids to just continue to carry on?
That's right.
To be contributors to the world.
Yeah. It did. It really just stood out to me that both these men were committed to a vision of something that was bigger than themselves, something that they would start and wouldn't see completed in their lifetime. And there's an element of just even selflessness, being unselfish, understanding I'm starting this thing and I'll probably never receive the recognition for it in my lifetime. And that's really what it takes to leave a legacy. And Korchak had this. This was crazy. He had this quote that said that if the work stopped after he died, his life would have been wasted.
Wow.
And I think that just struck me because it made me think about what's the work I'm committed to right now that hopefully whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm generating, like if it stopped, and listen, I think there's more to life than just, the work that you do, but having that idea, having that what am I committed to, right, that it would be a real tragedy if this just stopped.
Well, and I think even in regards to that, it's like we have to be careful thinking that we have to leave something physical.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it is just a thought, yeah, or a belief system, or a way of handling relationships or the world. So how we like recycling and all those things, that what are things that we're contributing, yeah, that we want to leave beyond ourselves that will help bring order,
yeah,
to the world.
Absolutely. And so the thing of it is that, again, we make reference to this. Now, here's the thing. Obviously, I think this idea of leaving a legacy I think it's a biblical value. I think it's something that God has given to us in the initial first pages of the Bible in Genesis there. And really what's really interesting. So again, if you're not a Christian, I just would ask that you just like tune into this for a second, because I think the scripture offers a really good frame of reference for our lives. And if you think about this, God places, well, first of all, what we see in the first few lines of Genesis is you see that there's this, God creates the heavens and the earth, and then it says, but the earth was formless and without, it was chaotic. It was kind of, there was water there and stuff, but yet the Spirit of God is there. And what do we see God doing? We see God creating out of the chaos, right? Yeah. And God is forming and fashioning. And then he says, hey, let us make man in our image. And so there's something about our meaning and our purpose comes when we step in and we look at maybe things that are chaotic, or the best example I can think of is even like a gardener, a gardener who comes up on a piece of property and says, ooh, I could put fruit trees here. I could put tomato plants over there, and I can cultivate, right, which is where we get our word culture from. Okay. That I could come in and I could cultivate this, and then I can feed my village, or I can feed what people with this is people who have this bigger vision than just themselves.
Right.
And really what's interesting is with the biblical narrative is you see Adam and Eve placed in there. And I was really challenged with, I think it was the Bible Project, Tim Mackey, and those guys over at the Bible Project that said, he kind of doesn't believe that the whole world was a paradise. He believes Eden was, but Adam and Eve's mandate from there was to take what was in Eden and spread it to the rest of the world.
That's interesting.
To Edenize the planet.
Wow.
And so for me, that's what legacy connects to. It's this idea of, okay, I still have this mandate. I still have this calling. I believe every human does.
Yeah.
And listen, this matters because this matters on an environmental level.
Absolutely.
This matters when it comes to other people. This idea that there might be chaos. Again, when I say chaos, I don't mean destruction necessarily. I just mean hey, it's
not orderly.
You got to mow the lawn.
Right. Well, it's like our lawn right now. Speaking of, okay, chaos. So we don't have a sprinkler system.
Yeah.
And we don't really have enough time in our evenings. Maybe we just don't take the time, maybe is a better word for it, to put our sprinkler out so it's on both sides. So we have more weeds than we do grass currently. So that would be chaotic to somebody that really enjoys a nice yard.
Yeah.
Because you don't want a lot of weeds. You want a lot of grass. And so, I mean, it's kind of chaos.
I think we should just put in a rock garden, honestly.
Honestly, I think I think though that explains chaos. That it
absolutely.
It still it still works. Our kids still like to play in our yard, even though it's weedy.
Yeah,
but
just keep it mowed. It's still green.
Right.
Yeah,
it's just weeds. So there's chaos, but it's like order would be grass.
So if you're watching this right now or listening online, this is Jesse's subtle way of telling me that this is important to her. That I I fix our lawn and practice what I preach. Is that what you're doing? No, but I would love to. The thing is, like, it gets really stinking hot in July, and it's like you cannot put enough water on.
Yeah.
But anyway, not defending myself, but kind of am. Just having fun with you. But no, absolutely. I think that when it comes to again this idea of legacy, we will either approach our lives as contributors or consumers.
Right.
Oh, back to the garden. One thing I was thinking about was, I don't remember if I said this in the message or not, but there's a funny joke about a pastor who's walking out of his church and he walks by the gardener, and the gardener's like, tending to the flowers and stuff like that. And the pastor looks at the gardener and just says, "Oh, I just love God's beautiful creation." And the gardener stand there kind of offended. And he's like, "You should have seen it when he had it all to himself."
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like our yard.
Absolutely. And so I think the lawn is a great example of how we can cultivate and how we can bring about change. But this happens though. So if we're consumers, I think the problem is sometimes we can only focus on our lawn, right? Sometimes we can only focus on our lives and when that happens, when the focus is largely about me, or maybe just me and my kids or my immediate family, then what happens is I just become a mere consumer.
Absolutely.
And we can see the destruction of, now here's the thing, consumerism. Now I know some people bristle at that word. All I'm saying is though, that I think we're wired to be contributors.
Absolutely.
We're all, in some way, wired to consume.
Right.
I mean, we eat food, we drink water, whatever, we need clothing, we are consumers.
Right.
But when we make that the end game,
right,
that's consumerism.
Right.
When it's all about what I can acquire for myself and I'm only thinking of me and maybe my kids rather than, and this is again another biblical concept. I love that, in the Old Testament, God is referred to as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Well, that's like 3 generations.
Yeah.
I've heard it said one time where, a little parenting thing here. It's like, you can't take credit for your kids and how they turned out until they have kids.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right? So
you don't know if you did a good job.
You don't know if you did a good job because
kids.
Did I not only pass on what I had to the next generation, but were they able to pass it on?
That's good.
I mean, that really shifts your way of thinking about, especially if you're thinking about legacy. If you're thinking about, again, legacy, it's more than just money. There are value systems that we pass on to our kids. I mean, even something like you and I right now working with our kids, I mean, part of legacy is just teaching them how to handle their money.
Absolutely.
I don't want our kids to make the same financial mistakes that you and I have made.
Right.
I want them to understand spend, save, give. There's a little plug for Dave Ramsey right there.
Yeah.
Right. But just this idea of like living a lifestyle that, we do spend items. It's okay to make purchases, but we want to save and be frugal on some things. But then we want to be charitable. We want to give because we want to have a life that's about more than us.
Well, and a good question you could ask yourself, like, when you're thinking about, okay, am I a consumer or am I a contributor? And again, like you said, you're going to be a little bit of both.
Oh, yeah.
But the goal is to be mainly a contributor, that you're leaving something behind. So a good question would be, is what are you handing to the next generation?
Yeah.
Or even, like you said, to maybe 2 generations.
Yeah.
From now.
And something that I've experienced very recently, and maybe on a future episode, I'm going to get my buddy Luke to come in and record. And those of you who have known me for a while know that I used to play with the band after the order. And something that happened really cool recently was our church decided that they were going to do this throwback night and bring back past graduates and stuff. And someone said, I think it was Pastor Mitch who said, "Oh, it wouldn't be a throwback night unless we get ATO to come and play." And so we did. At least a couple of us who could make it. And we came out and did a show. But I will tell you this: on Facebook, the number of people that just dropped little comments. Oh, I'm so sad I missed this. Oh, I wish I could have been there. And that was all nice. And it was really touching. But I think what stood out to me the most was when the comments of people who said, I still listen to my CD. I know the younger kids are like, what's a CD? But
ask your parents.
Yeah, ask your parents. But this idea that it jumped out at me that artistry, creativity, music can be a legacy.
Absolutely.
I mean, think about the songs we still sing from artists who have passed away that still make an impact in our lives, that still bring a smile to our face. I think that's the beauty. And so when we think about what is a legacy, we've got to really expand this notion. And I hope that you listening to this podcast and especially if you tune in on a regular basis, this is really our heart is we want to challenge a community of people who say, hey, I will be about more than just me and my own. I will be about my community. I will step up and I'll take leaving a legacy seriously. And here's the thing. You might be an artist, you might be a poet or painter. And I think what I want you to hear from us is get out there and create.
Absolutely.
Get your hands in the soil. Start cultivating things.
Yeah.
Because that is part of legacy. And we're going to talk about, even in a future episode, about vocation and how do we know what we're really wired for.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So as you're just thinking about this, just challenging, we want you to be thinking about what is my legacy? And so asking this question of what is the thing right now? What's the work that I'm going to commit to that's bigger than me?
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking, what's the chaos that you see around you that kind of grips your heart and you have a heart to cultivate that chaos that you desire to steward it? And to make it something better than what it is.
Yeah. I've been thinking about this. You might see a bunch of little 3rd or 4th grade boys running around with all this energy, nothing to do. And you're like, man, that's just chaos. Right. But maybe you're really good at coaching or getting kids to throw a football around.
Yeah.
You know, bringing order to that chaos. Part of your legacy might be, volunteering to coach at the YMCA, a flag football team or what, maybe that's part of legacy is you're bringing this order and you're actually investing in those kids to develop skills that are going to be with them for years to come.
Absolutely.
That's a legacy.
Well, it's kind of like when you hear about like Michael Jordan, he really invested without really thinking about himself in that situation, because he coached Kobe. Is that right?
He definitely reached out. Yeah, I know he reached out to him and definitely helped him, gave him some stuff. Yeah, Kobe Bryant.
And it's like, you think about that, and it's like Kobe Bryant could have eventually became a huge competitor.
Well, he was a pretty big competitor
to Michael Jordan.
Right.
And
well, some people do argue. I would say some people do argue today about who was better.
Right.
But Kobe even says, I wouldn't be who I was without Michael Jordan.
And so it's like you see these people that really invest their own talents into the next generation. Yeah. Tom Brady's another one that it's like we watched a thing on him and just how intentional he was.
Oh, you're ruffling feathers now, though.
I know, but it's like, but it's amazing how intentional he was with those he played with of just being an encourager and saying, hey, do this next time. Because he's played enough that it's like he's almost a parent to those he's playing with currently. That it's like he is contributing to their success and it will go beyond him.
And it makes the game better.
Absolutely.
It makes the game better. And that, it's funny. I know you don't necessarily pay attention a lot to the sports world, but there was a tweet that went out where there was a quarterback, and I won't mention his name, but he's a pro quarterback for a certain team, and his team had drafted somebody, and so he just basically said, don't expect to get any tips from me or anything like that. We're both competing for the same position, blah, 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 whatever. And what was incredible was Kurt Warner tweeted out to this player and said, hey, if you need a mentor, I'll come be your mentor. We need more mentors. We need more people to step up. And what's interesting is even you brought up Tom Brady. Drew Bledsoe was the quarterback before Tom Brady, and he was the man for the job. All this, big dollar contract, all this kind of stuff goes out with an injury. But the thing was even Drew Bledsoe watching that, Man in the Arena, that series, Man in the Arena, watching that, Drew Bledsoe, he still invested in Tom.
Absolutely.
And he still poured into him, and he helped him develop. And so what's really kind of cool, and the sad thing about it is our culture isn't necessarily wired to give people credit who should get credit.
Absolutely.
Because we really do focus on celebrity, and we don't pay attention to the people, But the thing is like even Tom acknowledged in this of like, hey, Drew was a team player in this.
Absolutely.
And even when they went to the Super Bowl and, hey, who's going to start and who's going to be our guy, all that. I mean, that was a very selfless thing for Drew Bledsoe to step back and be like, hey, we're a team.
Absolutely.
We win, lose as a team, and he's been our man, and so we're going to stick behind him. And you think about that, and that's
I know selfless.
Absolutely. And I will argue it made it's made the last 20 years of the NFL interesting. Now, some people think the Patriots won too many times or Tom Brady's won too many times, but I'll argue that I think it's made things better. Right. And I think this is what happens when we do really truly operate from a legacy standpoint. When we really care about those around us and we're going to invest in them. And maybe they go on and have more success than I do.
Right.
But that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
It's a good thing. One of the things I love, just even at our church, and we're not alone in this. Again, this is a biblically informed value, but I like to say we're a Jeremiah 29 church. And basically, if you're not familiar with that, it's just that the people of Israel were taken into captivity. So here's another nation that's come in and imposed their will upon them, pulled out some of the best of the best, made them slaves and stuff. And they're like, what do we do? Do we rebel, revolt? Do we retreat? What do we do? And Jeremiah basically prophesies and says, hey, look, where you're at in Babylon, plant gardens, invest in the future, pray for the welfare of your city.
Absolutely.
This is of the people that have oppressed you. Pray for, and the catch was this, because basically your prosperity is linked to that city's prosperity.
It's good.
And there's something about us, and why we're drawn to the church is not just because I'm on staff there. I mean, this is just always we've been connected to. Even in that, I think there's this idea of legacy of, what? We serve in the city of Kearney, and we want Kearney to be the best. And we know that as we invest in the city, we're not only just investing in other people, we're also investing in our own future.
Absolutely. And in the future of
other generations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because what we cultivate today does move on.
Yeah.
Whether it's good, whether it's bad, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's like legacy is left.
Legacy is left. Now, you want that to be a good thing. And most time people think it's only a good thing, but this is going to be a common catchphrase for us is we say every leader leaves a legacy. Everyone's a leader, by the way, but in some form or fashion, because leadership is merely influence. So whether you think you're a leader or not, you may not be the top dog in your organization, but you have influence.
Absolutely.
And you are influencing people, in one way or another. Well, is there any other, I know you jotted down some notes from that message. Is there anything else that we haven't covered? We got about just a couple minutes left here.
You just made a statement. It's just, the more we chase happiness, the less we find it.
Yeah.
And I just was thinking about that in regards to legacy. And sometimes I think in our individual lives, and I'm guilty of it, focusing on myself and what makes me happy and how I can be fulfilled.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like switching your brain.
Yeah.
To do the opposite of the more I steward, the more I serve, the more I give to others, the happier I'll be. Not necessarily chasing the happiness for myself and being an individually focused. And so that contributor versus consumer, the more we contribute, the happier we'll be overall in life. And I think that's just, I mean, if that's all you get from leaving a legacy is don't chase happiness.
Yeah.
Chase contributing, because it will make you happy. It's weird how it works.
It is.
Because the more selfless we are, the more joyful we are.
It's not easy.
No,
not easy to be that way.
Absolutely
Chasing
not.
happiness is usually kind of the easy thing, but yeah, it's like you said, it's almost like it's a mirage. I'm glad that you brought that up, because absolutely that speaks to legacy. Legacy has to be intentional. It's not always, sexy or fun, or it's hard work,
Absolutely.
even just, staying dialed in financially or whatever, and just sticking to a budget because you're committed to this bigger process of legacy, and maybe leaving something for your kids or your church or, whatever. What's really interesting is this has been studied pretty thoroughly as far as like people, chasing happiness, and more often than not, the people who chase after those things never find enough, but yet people who invest in relationships and go after those things are always, more likely to be fulfilled in those things. And what's interesting is Simon Sinek, he wrote a book like Start With Your Why or whatever. He had a TED Talk that was all about finding your why and stuff. And what's really interesting, I was watching a talk from Simon Sinek, and he kind of broke into a little bit of the brain biology on this, and I thought this was fascinating. And it was this. He says, imagine you're walking down the street and you see someone who, maybe has money fall out of their backpack or something like that, and it hits the ground, right? And there's a person behind them, a random stranger, who goes and comes behind them, and that person just keeps walking. They don't even realize that it happened, right?
Right.
That person scoops up their stuff, grabs the money and catches up to them and taps on their shoulder and says, "Hey, you dropped this." Okay. He says for both of those parties, oxytocin is released in the brain by random strangers.
That's amazing.
Oxytocin is a bonding hormone. It's a bonding chemical that we have as human beings. It's what makes us feel close to one another, right? And you have two complete strangers that, out of just doing this gesture for somebody else, that these two people, although they're strangers, through this experience, they're now bonded in a way to each other that they actually will walk away from that situation actually trusting people more. I mean, granted, it's a slice, right? It's small, but you think about that compounding over and over and over again. If we have a lot of people in our lives that are doing things like that. Here's what's crazy, though. Simon Sinek took it another level, and he says, not only is that powerful for those two people, but he says, but if you're standing there watching it happen, you get the oxytocin release as well.
That's interesting.
So just by you witnessing somebody else do something for someone.
Yeah.
And this is, hey, I'll just put a plug for churches and faith communities. It's like, I think that's why as people, we've got to be invested in places, not to just go listen to a good message every Sunday, but to be living with a community who says, we're going to go and serve. We're going to do things because there's something about me. There's so much negative in the world.
Right.
There's so much that I see every day that's bringing me down, that makes me want to lose my faith in humanity. I better be with some people who are thinking bigger than themselves, because guess what? As we serve together, we'll be bonded to one another, and we're actually turning around perception of other people, even in our own city, who don't even know us, because they'll look at us and go, that's really cool.
That's good.
It is. Yeah. So thank you, Simon, for that bit of wisdom.
That's right.
Well, hey, I think we're going to bring it to a close right there. And so thank you, honey. Thank you for being my sidekick in this. And we will continue on with this legacy lifestyle series. And so be thinking before the next episode. Be thinking, what is your legacy? What are those things? And pay attention to the things that are being stirred up in you. Yeah. And so in the meantime, subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Find us on YouTube and all the social media platforms. So we will catch you later.